accountability, free elections and human rights. The key are free elections, which make it possible to compete for power, not in the streets, but brought through the ballot box. But for all the countries in question, the challenges which remain, including economic and social ones, are enormous. History is in the making, but it has not been made yet. So let's be cautious, but offer our best support. And thirdly, we must be consistent. People in the region are listening to our message from Europe on human rights. But I also watch television and read newspapers about the way we apply human rights values when it comes to people coming from the region. Over the last months, more than 23,000 people have fled from North Africa. I'm worried that the situation may evolve into a migration crisis, and a crisis whose victims will be, first of all, the fundamental rights of the individual concerned. This is not to say that all European governments do not have the right and the responsibility to regulate the migration and enforce the law, but Europe's response must be in line with the international and human rights and humanitarian standards. We cannot expect these countries to apply the human rights standards we cherish if we do not apply them ourselves. This is clear. Now, what can Europe do? And, well, I have to give the reply from my position, from the Council of Europe position. But first of all, what is Council of Europe? The Council of Europe was established after the war because the leaders learned that the war came because of the total breakdown of human rights. Therefore, we have established the most effective, the most comprehensive machinery of human rights history has ever seen in Strasbourg, with monitoring, with the European Convention on Human Rights, with the monitoring bodies to see to it that member states live up to the obligations in the Convention. And on top of that, the Court of Human Rights, which gives people, 800 million people in Europe, the right to petition to this court. And we have, and that is my point, we have valuable expertise in building laws and writing constitutions. And therefore, we can facilitate and help people to transform from authoritarian rule to democratic constitutions and laws which can guarantee free elections. And we have conventions, 200 conventions, and many of these conventions would be very, very important for these countries to connect to, because they are dealing with the most urgent issues in any democracy. For instance, fighting corruption, fighting human trafficking, fighting money laundering, fighting terrorism, all these new threats that we have in Europe today and which we also see in the Middle East. So connecting to our conventions would be a very important tool for these countries in order to reinforce or to establish democratic institutions and stability and fight against these threats that we see actually many places in the world today. Well, the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu once wrote that if you don't change direction, you might end up where you are heading. The people of Central and Eastern Europe did not want to end where their countries were heading. They stood up against authoritarian regimes and changed direction. In doing so, they have gained experiences most valuable to the people of the Middle East and North Africa, who have also stood up because they did not want to end up where their rulers were heading either. I would like to end by pointing out some very important messages, which I think will be decisive for where this region is heading. First of all, one has to secure free and fair elections by law that guarantees everybody to participate in the elections. there was a conversation between Stalin and Molotov once. And Molotov said that, Stalin said, oh, we have to organize elections. And then Molotov said, oh, well, it's very dangerous because we don't know who is going to win. And then Stalin said, take it easy, I'm counting the votes. So we have to, I mean, this is not democracy. Free and fair elections. And then to establish checks and balances. And a very important part of that is free media. If you don't have free media, you can be sure that you get corruption. And you get mismanagement. You have to have institutions that secure checks and balances in the system. It is very important to connect to international standards, which I have spoken about, over conventions, for instance, in the Council of Europe. And empowering women. I think that is crucial in any society, but in particular in this region. And my last point would be to say that it is important to pay respect for religion, but there has to be also a separation of religion and politics. This is fundamental in a democracy. Religion is about faith, politics is about compromise. In a democratic society, you have to be able to make compromises between different forces. That's the nature of politics. Well, I'm very glad to be here. I would like to end by saying that if you look at the past, the 19th and first part of the 20th century was about building nations, in particular in this part of the world, which was a very important contribution to the development of the world. But we also got nationalism. That was the bad side of the coin, which brought wars to Europe. As a consequence of the wars, we went from nationalism to internationalism, based on the universal rights that was adopted back in 1949 in the United Nations. It took half a century to get these universal rights to arrive in Eastern and Central Europe. And now they are coming to North Africa and South Mediterranean. I think we have to keep in mind what the leaders in Kremlin forgot and what the leaders in Libya and Egypt and Tunisia also forgot, that people in the world, they have the same wishes, namely to live a normal life, to raise their children, to get education, to get a job, to get access to health care, to be able to travel. All these rights that are about the universal rights, they are spreading all over the globe, and it cannot be stopped. It can be impeded for a certain period of time, but it will, at the end of the day, arrive in all the countries of the world, and that is what's happening now in the Middle East and North Africa, and that is why we from Europe has to assist as much as we can, but we have to be humble, and we have to pay respect for their history and the way they want to do it. Thank you very much.